I used to come to this coffee shop for the Wi-Fi. Now, I come because she's here. Every morning around 9, she walks in, same seat near the window, same cardigan even when it's too warm for one. She orders tea, not coffee, but the barista still teases her like she's part of the regulars. Her name's Sarah. I only know because she told him once, and he said it too loud. I'm not sure when I started timing my visits to hers. Maybe after I noticed how she folds her napkin into perfect quarters before setting it beside her cup, or how she looks out the window like she's waiting for someone she knows won't come. It's a quiet kind of noticing. The kind that builds without permission. I'm 24, she's in her 40s, maybe mid. The kind of beautiful that doesn't ask to be looked at, it just is. My girlfriend Lena calls her, your coffee woman, when she jokes. She doesn't know I hate that. Sarah and I have only talked twice. Once when the sugar packets were empty and she slid hers toward me without looking up. The second time, last week, when she said, "You always order the same thing," and smiled like she'd been keeping count. That smile stayed with me all afternoon, through the errands and the music and the texts I didn't answer. This morning, the cafe was half empty, rain starting to thin outside. Sarah sat in her usual spot, but something about her looked different. Not her, exactly, but the air around her. Her phone buzzed once, and she turned it face down. When I walked past, she looked up and said softly, "You're late today." I laughed. "Didn't realize you noticed." She raised an eyebrow. "You're the only one who orders black coffee and stares at the rain like it owes you something." I tried to say something back, but words didn't come. She laughed, quietly. The kind that barely reaches the eyes but feels kind anyway. We talked a bit, weather, books on her table, how she marks her pages with receipts instead of bookmarks. Small talk that felt larger than it should. When her tea cooled, she touched the mug like it was something alive. Then Lena texted. "Just one line, can you come by later? My sister's here." I stared at the message too long until Sarah said, "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied, pocketing the phone, "just life being loud again." She nodded, understanding more than I'd said. Then she smiled, that small, sympathetic curve that makes you feel seen and slightly undone. That evening, at Lena's apartment, her sister opened the door before she did. It took me a second to register. The same cardigan, the same quiet eyes. Sarah, she looked just as startled, then covered it with a polite, practiced smile. "You must be him," she said. "I've heard about you." Lena called out from the kitchen, "Sarah, you met already?" We both said, "No," at the same time. Dinner was a blur, laughter, half sentences, forks scraping plates. I couldn't stop glancing her way. Once, she caught me looking and didn't look away. When I was leaving, she followed me to the door, saying she'd grab her coat. Her voice was low. "Lena's lucky," she said, almost too soft to hear. Then, after a pause, "If you were mine, I'd treat you better." I didn't know what to say. I still don't. But as I walked out into the night, the rain had started again, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't check my phone. I kept showing up at the cafe even when I had no reason. It was a small, unspoken ritual, like checking the mailbox even though I knew nothing would be there. Sarah was there too, sometimes early, sometimes late, but always with that quiet air of someone half in the world, half elsewhere. One morning the rain was soft against the glass. She stirred her tea slowly, eyes tracing the streaks running down the window pane. I sat across from her, hands wrapped around my own mug, pretending I hadn't memorized the way her fingers curved around the handle. "You ever write things down?" she asked suddenly, not looking at me. "Sometimes," I said, shrugging, "mostly lists. Things I forget otherwise." She smiled faintly. "I used to keep a journal when I was your age, one entry for every feeling. I stopped after life got messy." I nodded, unsure how to respond. Life had a way of doing that, didn't it? Messing with timing, priorities, and sometimes people. We fell quiet after that, letting the words hang between us like the steam rising off our drinks. I imagined what it would feel like to say the wrong thing, to cross some invisible line, and yet, sitting there, I also imagined saying the right one, and what that might cost. She was my girlfriend's sister, older, complicated. Divorced, they said. And I was 24, still learning how to stand in my own skin. The unlikelihood of it made the small stolen moments feel heavier, more urgent. I reached for the sugar from my coffee. She noticed and offered a hand to help, brushing against mine ever so lightly. My pulse jumped, though we both pretended nothing happened. You ever imagine how it might have been? She asked, voice casual, but something lingered beneath the words. Sometimes, I admitted, but I try not to. Her eyes flicked toward mine, and I caught a flash of understanding, or maybe recognition. That quiet acknowledgement that something was there but couldn't be spoken aloud. She reached over, adjusting the sleeve of my jacket, and held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary. A simple touch, but it carried the weight of all the things we weren't saying, the longing, the guilt, the tiny thrill of being seen by someone who shouldn't care. I didn't answer immediately. I just watched her fingers fall back to her teacup, the steam curling up between us. She smiled a little, a soft tilt of the mouth that made the cafe feel smaller, more intimate, as if we were the only ones in it. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Not the me who showed up to classes or smiled at coworkers or answered texts on time, but the me I didn't tell anyone about. When I left, she gave a small wave, one of those gestures that feels like a promise and a warning all at once. I walked out into the drizzle, my coat sticking to my back, my hands still tingling from where hers had briefly brushed mine. And for the first time that day, I didn't imagine what could go wrong, only what it might feel like if she stayed. The cafe smelled like rain and coffee. Sarah was already at the corner table when I arrived, head bent over her book. I hesitated by the door, watching the way her hair caught the light, golden strands falling over her cheek. Morning, I said, finally. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet space. She looked up, startled, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Hey, I sat down opposite her, trying to act casual, though my hands itched to do anything but sit still. She noticed, I think, because her eyes flicked to mine, just long enough for me to catch it before she looked back at the pages. I tried small talk, weather classes, coffee that was too bitter. She laughed, short, but it sounded different today, sharper, maybe. Something underneath it, some tension that hadn't been there before. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, paused, then slid it face down. Everything okay? I asked. She shook her head, not meeting my eyes. Just Lena. And just like that, the air between us shifted. My pulse quickened, and I realized I'd been leaning in without noticing. I pulled back, suddenly aware of how close we were. The space between us felt too small, charged. I wanted to ask what was wrong, I wanted to reach for her hand. But instead I stirred my coffee, pretending the spoon was the only thing I cared about. She did the same. And then, for a few moments, we were two people moving in parallel. The same gestures, different intentions. A barista dropped a tray somewhere in the back, a loud clatter that made both of us jump. She laughed, a little too loudly, covering it up. I felt my chest tighten. Moments like this, brief, absurd, were enough to make me dizzy with thought. We talked again, but everything felt sideways. I caught myself imagining what it would be like if the distance vanished. If I leaned forward and she didn't pull away. If words I hadn't said could linger in the air between us, heavy and warm. She brushed her hand across the table to reach her sugar, and our fingers almost touched, just a hair's width. I froze. She froze too. I thought maybe she would pull back. She didn't. But she didn't close the gap either. Your coffee's getting cold, she said finally, eyes downcast. A simple statement, but the words felt loaded. I didn't answer immediately. I just watched her, the curve of her neck, the soft tilt of her shoulder, and felt my own hesitation in my chest. I left shortly after, lingering at the door. She walked with me to the curb, just under the awning, the rain wetting the tips of her shoes. I should go, she said. Pause. Before it gets complicated. I nodded, swallowing hard. The words weren't about the rain, they weren't about coffee, they were about us. And for a moment, I thought we might, almost, close the space between us. Just enough for one perfect, impossible brush of lips. But the moment passed. I walked away with my coat stuck to my back, and the sound of her laugh lingered behind me, a quiet ache I couldn't name. The park was empty except for a few joggers and a mother chasing her toddler in a red raincoat. I had walked without thinking, just trying to escape the buzz of the cafe, of the lingering tension, of my own thoughts. And there she was, sitting on the same bench I usually avoided because it was too exposed. "Fancy seeing you here," I said, though my voice came out softer than I meant. She shrugged, looking out over the wet grass. "I needed air." Pause. "Thought I'd find you here too." Her words felt like an accusation or maybe a warning. I sat down, careful not to crowd her. She tilted her head, watching me with eyes that always seemed to read a little too much. Like she could see the spaces I tried to hide. "Did Lena mention me?" I asked, finally after a long pause. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Not much. You don't talk about me either." I laughed short, brittle. "Wes, we both have our walls." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the occasional drip from the leaves above. I wanted to reach over, touch her hand, tell her she didn't know what she was doing to me. I wanted to warn her, tell her to stop looking at me like that. Because I wasn't ready to be seen so clearly. "You think about me too much," she said suddenly, voice low. I froze. She didn't look at me, just spoke to the space between us. "Do I?" "You do. Every time you walk in, every time you smile, every time you." She stopped, looked down, folded her hands in her lap. Never mind, I wanted her to finish. I wanted to hear it all. But I didn't push, I just leaned back, letting the silence stretch. I shouldn't be here," she said finally. Then, almost as if the words were dangerous, she added, "But maybe I need to be." Something tightened in my chest. I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to say she didn't know what she was doing to me, that I was more than willing to be ruined by her. But I didn't. Words felt brittle and insufficient. Instead, I just watched her fingers move over each other, small, nervous movements. I imagined tracing them, memorizing the angles and shadows. And in that quiet, I felt the weight every pause we had ever shared. "You think about me too much," I said, repeating her words, not as a joke, not as a tease, just as a confession. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, the world shrank to that park bench, the damp air, and us. I wanted to ask her to stay, to tell me what she wanted, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I only thought, how far is too far? And she said nothing. The cafe smelled different when I walked in that morning. Not bad, not changed, just off. She wasn't there. I lingered near the counter, pretending to scroll through my phone, but my eyes kept drifting to the corner table where she usually sat, empty. The chair tucked in neatly, teacup gone. I waited, thinking she might show, maybe running late, but she didn't. Later I found out she'd called in sick. Or maybe she hadn't, I wasn't sure. Everything felt blurred, the reason, the timing, the sudden distance. I kept showing up anyway, hoping she'd be there or that she'd glance my way, or even just notice my presence. But the days passed, and the spaces between us grew louder than any words we could have said. When I saw her again, it was at Lena's apartment. I had walked past her on the street without realizing at first. She saw me, looked away, pretended she didn't. "Hi," I said. My voice caught too quiet. "Hey," she replied, clipped, not her usual rhythm. Her cardigan hung differently, like armor. We sat at opposite ends of the sofa, forks paused mid-bite, silence stretched longer than comfort allowed. She spoke only when necessary. Laughs were short, eyes avoided. I felt every ounce of my hope fold inward. I imagined every possible explanation. A sudden ex she hadn't mentioned. A child I didn't know about. Memories I wasn't meant to touch. And somewhere in the imagining, I began to doubt everything. The coffee, the laughs, the small touches, the quiet confessions. Maybe I'd read it all wrong. I left before dessert, muttering something about errands, but my mind stayed on her. On the space she'd left between us, heavy and quiet. I wanted to call, to text, to ask her why she'd withdrawn, but I didn't. Instead, I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the keyboard. A message unsent. Days later, I sat in the cafe again, the chair across from me still empty. The barista noticed, asked if I wanted my usual. I nodded without answering, the steam of the coffee curling like the questions that wouldn't leave me. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The words were there, somewhere, lingering on the tip of my tongue. But she wasn't there to hear them, and I wasn't sure if I wanted her to be. I imagined her walking in any moment, settling into her usual spot, casual smile and quiet eyes, as if nothing had changed. But she didn't. I left the cafe that day with my coat heavy on my shoulders, a weight that wasn't rain. The chair across from me remained empty, and for the first time, I noticed how much it hurt not because of what happened, but because of what hadn't. And I wondered, quietly, if she'd ever come back. The kitchen smelled faintly of bread and late night coffee. I had come by to return a book I'd borrowed from Lena, an excuse, really. But Sarah was there, leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled up, fingers tracing the rim of her mug. We didn't speak at first. The hum of the fridge, the clink of spoons against mug, the occasional drip from the sink filled the space. It was ordinary domestic and yet unbearable in its intimacy. I wanted to leave. I wanted to say something, anything. But my throat felt thick with unsent words. "You came," she said finally, voice quiet, careful.
"Yeah," I said.
Paused. I thought I should. She didn't ask what I meant. She just watched me. Eyes steady, but something in them shifted. Patience, caution, maybe fear. "I've been avoiding you," she said after a long pause. "Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what I wanted." I swallowed, feeling the words settle in my chest. I thought about every coffee, every almost touch, every laugh stretched too long, every moment that had felt like crossing an invisible line. I didn't want to ruin things. I said, finally, voice low, or make it harder for anyone, especially Lena. Her hand twitched, brushing the counter as if to steady herself. Then she reached, slowly, and touched my forearm, light, careful, electric. I felt the pulse of hesitation, of restraint, permission. "I thought about you," she admitted, almost a whisper. "More than I should have. More than I wanted to. And I still do." We didn't say anything after that. Words wouldn't help. They were too heavy, too late, too dangerous. Silence became our language. I leaned back slightly, giving her the space she needed, though every inch between us burned. I wanted to reach for her hand, to hold it, to tell her it was okay. That whatever we felt didn't need to be solved right away. But I didn't. I only watched her, breathing, steadying, alive. Finally, she gave a small, crook smile. Not the dazzling smile I had memorized, but the one that felt human, real, unguarded.
"Okay," she said softly.
"Okay," I echoed. No promises, no confessions beyond the barest truth. Just acknowledgement. Just being seen. Just existing in the same room without pretending, without pretense, without resolution. It was enough. I left shortly after, pausing at the door to glance back. She was still by the counter, her mug in hand, a quiet weight on her shoulders, but lighter somehow. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel paused. I felt present. It was 8:47 am, same as always. I walked past the cafe, expecting her to be there, maybe a little late, as usual. But today she was. Black coffee in hand, the chair pulled out just enough for me to slide in. We didn't speak at first. Just settled into the rhythm of mornings. The quiet clink of spoons, the hiss of the espresso machine, the small, shared laughter over something only we found amusing. Routine had a gentle authority now, a rhythm neither of us wanted to break. Months had passed since that rainy night, since the bench, the unsent messages, the half-confessions. Life had stretched in between work, errands, evenings alone. Yet somehow, it had also stretched toward each other. The distance had taught patience, restraint, the quiet art of being together without needing to solve everything. She reached across the table and nudged my cup. "Cold again," she said, with a soft grin. I shrugged. "Wes, some things don't change." Her laugh was small, almost apologetic, almost mine, and somehow, that was enough. We walked afterward, slowly, toward the park. The bench we had once sat on alone had a different meaning now. Less charged, more belonging. I let her take the space first, watching her settle with the ease of someone who had claimed it honestly, who had earned it. We spoke sparingly, but each word mattered. Shared memories, small grievances, jokes only we understood. The awkward pauses didn't hurt anymore, they had become part of the conversation, a language built between us. I noticed the way she folded her napkin after breakfast, the way she stirred her tea just enough to make the rim glisten. Little things I had loved before, I loved again, quieter now, less urgent, more permanent. Later, she pressed her hand against mine for a moment, no words needed. Just touch, permission, presence. I thought about everything we hadn't said. Everything we almost ruined by speaking too soon, by waiting too long. And I realized it didn't matter, we were here, present, fragile, messy, human, and that was enough. I could feel it in the subtle warmth of her hand, in the rhythm of our footsteps, in the way the world seemed to shrink down to us, and the slow, ordinary magic of mornings and tea and black coffee. When I finally left the park, she didn't wave, she gave me to. That look she gave me, a tilt of the head, a soft smile, a quiet acknowledgement, stayed in my chest. A private message, a secret code we'd never speak aloud but both understood perfectly. Some love stories don't shout. They settle in your bones, in the silence between the words, in the spaces nobody notices. Ours was one of them.